we said there was 3 parts to God's plan for our achieving personal financial victory. The first of these was, remember? Tithing. And the second one was saving. There you go. Okay. Now, what's our most favorite financial thing to do in the world? And this is the third part of the plan. Spending. There you go. That's exactly right. Okay. So we're going to be really looking at that part this afternoon. And as you can imagine, we as a society, blessed that we are in most cases, we tend to be very materialistic in our outlook and in our look on what our worldview tends to be in some cases. So in order to kind of give you an idea of how materialistic we are, how what we tend to spend our things on, I want to take you on an imaginary trip to a junkyard. Now you just say, well, why a junkyard? Well, that's a place where there's a number of things that you are likely to see. What you're going to see are remnants of stuff that at one time really, really mattered to someone. You will see cars that people bragged about and spent most of their Saturday afternoons washing and waxing. You'll see dolls that now have no arms that once were a shiny plaything on Christmas morning. You'll see tools that people use at work and home to earn and supplement their living. You'll see items that for a while people poured their very lives into and now have no real eternal value at all. Now, this not so figurative journey into a junkyard really can help us making purchasing decisions and give you a new perspective on how and why on what you spend your money. So kind of just remember that those things that you spend your money on are someday likely going to be in that junkyard. So in the next few minutes, we're going to really be talking about some of the basic parts of that nemesis that is spending, and in some cases the related debt that goes along with that. To help us accomplish this, we're going to again be using the 4 schedules, and go back, if you will, go back to page 9, which is Schedule 1, and then there's three more schedules after that page and the succeeding pages. And again, remember, these schedules they look intimidating, they look daunting, but they are nothing more than really tools and suggestions to use to help you in knowing where your receipts come from, knowing where they are, and what you are spending your money on. That's really the thing. Now, if you're using those things, Tammy, did we send those out on Excel spreadsheets? I did. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully y'all have those in Excel format. So if you see a line item in those handouts in the Excel spreadsheets that doesn't apply, simply insert a line or simply title it something else. There's no hard and fast use of these, but they're merely suggestions to help you create a budget that makes the most of your resources and within predetermined guidelines. Okay, now the first of these tools is the first one on page 9, which is that Schedule 1, which is the 10 plus time 80 plan for maximizing and managing money in your life. So there are, I keep forgetting this. Y'all need to throw something at me here. There we go. Thank you. Okay. I'm not used to these modern things. So think about this. What are the 2 pieces of your everyday financial life? You have receipts, which is whatever your income is, whatever your spouse's income, whatever your children's income, whatever your investment income is. That's the total of your receipts. And that is, there's a line there that says that's your total household receipts. That's the gross line item on your paycheck in the aggregate. That's the most that you can use to take care of that other side of the spending equation, which is expenditures. Now, if you find that you are in a receipts minus expenditures negative position, what are the two options that you have? Exactly. You either have to increase your receipts or decrease your expenses. And that's some of the things that we're going to try to help you do. As we discussed this morning, most of us have limited resources, but we do not, and we do not have unlimited earnings. So before you can begin to get a spending under control, you need to schedule the source of all your household resources. Again, that's on Schedule 1 at the top. This schedule provides the basis, that is, total household receipts, the resources available for the three parts of God's plan for financial victory: tithing, saving, and spending. Okay, on this schedule, you're going to see, as I said a few minutes ago, space to list your income, your spouse's income, any investment income, all the places that provide resources, income to your household. Remember, this is gross income. We're going to look at taxes and deductions in just a few minutes. Total household receipts is the limiting factor on all the other parts of the plan. Until you increase the receipts, you can only spend so much, you can only tithe so much, you can only save so much, and you can only put aside so much for resources for investments. Because of this, maximizing financial resources is a critical part of your family budget. Now, all through this morning session and some of this afternoon session, we talked about one thing, and that's getting God involved in your family resources. Now, we're all familiar with the story in 2 Kings 4:17 of the woman pleading Elisha for help. This woman is in financial distress. Her sons are in danger of being sold into slavery. The only resources she has is a jar of oil. Elisha, the man of God, told her to borrow as many empty jars as she can from the neighbors. He told her, and do not get just a few. She did not hesitate or question why. She just stepped out in faith, did what she was told, and as we all know remember from the story, she was able to fill all the jars from the only tangible resource she had, and that was the one jar of oil. Now, through faith, she got God involved in her resources. Her actions were not for show, because if you remember from the story, it says that she went and shut the door behind her. This was not something that was a public display. It was simply between her and God. Her actions, her faith, was just between her and God. Now, one of the things that she did also, if you remember in that, is pray. As we said this morning, as we said this afternoon, anytime you're going into an endeavor, whether it be praying about your budget, praying about your personal budget, or your church budget, all of these things, be sure you approach it from the standpoint of prayer first. In Proverbs 21:5, we are cautioned that the acquisition of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor, the pursuit of death. Now, it's not a sin to have resources. However, it is a sin if they are acquired by lying or out of deceit. We all have likely many types of resources. Now, we are to seek counsel, go to God in prayer, and get Him involved in our problem. Now, back to the handout. The purpose of Schedule 1 is to help you get a determination of your household resources, then to assist you in the allocation of those resources. Remember what we talked about in this morning's session. The first deduction from your total household receipt is tithe. Again, biblically it's a 10%, but take the Brother Ward's suggestion. If you can't get to the 10%, do what you can, but know God knows what's in your heart, and He's going to either help you with that or you're not going to benefit from it. You're not going to be blessed by it. Again, the next deduction is taxes, and all of those things come off of your paycheck. And so list all of those things, your benefits, your taxes, all of those things, and that comes down to the next line item, which is working or available income. That's the receipts after all your deductions. That's right there in the middle of that section, or that one page. Now, take your working income amount and you're going to divide that into 3 parts. The first of these parts is savings. 10% of your working income we want you to set aside as savings. And as we stated, as I talked about earlier, you need an emergency fund equivalent to at 4 and preferably 6 months of your total working income. Now, as I said, this is to be used for unbudgeted, that is emergency items. Anything that you don't budget for is an emergency item. That can be things like, as we said this morning, like job loss, illness, car repairs, anything like that. If any of all of the emergency fund is used, it must be replenished as quickly as possible, because I don't know about you, but it seems like the emergencies don't just happen once and then they all go away. The second part is living. This is the 80% of the working income. This is what's available to meet all the obligations as outlined on the next handout, Schedule 2. And we're going to discuss that. Let me go ahead and go to that, if it will go to that. Nope. Yes, okay. Okay. This is what's available to you to meet all of your obligations as outlined on this section, this handout, which is Schedule 2. We're just going to discuss that in a few minutes. Now, the third part of this is the final 10%, which is debt and future planning. Debt and future planning. This is the final 10% of your working income. This portion is what you use to pay off credit card debt obligations, and we're going to talk about that's on Schedule 4 in just a few minutes. Now, you say, okay, once all my debt is paid off and I have my emergency fund, then what? Well, what you now want to do is do what Troy and Ward were talking about, is start planning for retirement. That's where the money comes from for retirement planning. But you can't and you should not do that until you have your emergency fund in place and you've got all of your credit card debt paid off. Now, a lot of you may be saying, well, that sounds kind of familiar. None of this is all of that uncommon, or it's just common sense. And some of you may have seen this in things like the Dave Ramsey course, and I think Tammy is going to talk about that maybe as a resource later on. So be aware that that's part of it. So once debt is paid off and you have your emergency fund, then you can start planning for long-term investments, that is retirement. So the second of these tools is to create a financial plan on how you expect to spend the resources God has given you. Okay, so turn, if you will, to Schedule 2, which I believe is on page 10. Yeah, it starts on page 10 and extends to page 11. So, we want to create a plan for how you're going to spend the resources God has given you. Your financial plan should include an outline of your needs. Now, we talked about, there's that word. So, there's equivalent, because Troy and Ward talked this morning and a little bit this afternoon about opportunities and what was the other one? There's opportunities and responsibilities, yeah. Okay, taking that on the personal side of it, there's needs and wants. They're exactly the same. Needs and wants. Okay. As I said, your financial plan should include an outline of your needs. These needs should be according to God's plan. Now, look at Philippians 4:19 and 1 Timothy 9:6. Verse 19 says, "And my God will supply all of your needs according to His riches in glory in Christ Jesus." And verse 8 says, "If we have food, covering, with these we shall be content." This part of your financial plan should be directed towards listing your needs, including housing, food, clothing, and transportation. In each of the categories on Schedule 2, you need to distinguish, as we said, between needs and wants. You need shelter, but you don't necessarily need a giant home in a gated community. You need transportation, but not necessarily a high-priced luxury vehicle. You need downtime, but you may not be able to afford an out-of-state, an out-of-country, or maybe even an out-of-city vacation every single year. I was listening to Dr. Tony Evans the other day, and he said, if you have food, if you have shelter, and you have clothes, all your needs are basically met. Everything else beyond that is wants and opportunities. Remember, again, thank God for meeting your needs. God is the one that's providing the blessings for meeting your needs. In the Old Testament, the Israelites complained because they wanted meat, even though God had provided manna. If the essentials of your life are being met, you need to thank and praise God, because many of the people do not even have that. Now, after your needs have been met, you can move on to budgeting your wants. Plan for how you want without your giving, without going into debt. Now, this could be a separate savings account and not part of the two that we talked about, or for maybe a future vacation or some other similar thing. How many times, or how many of you know what a Christmas club is? Yes. That's simply nothing more than a separately named savings account for, specifically, it used to be for buying Christmas gifts. Yeah. There's no reason at all, that there's nothing that says you can't have multiple savings accounts. That may be a good tool for a lot of you to say, okay, I'm going to set aside money for college education. I'm going to set aside money to start saving for a new car or another vehicle. I'm going to set aside money for a vacation. I'm going to set aside money for all sorts of different things. But remember, it just typically depends on your individual circumstances and the resources that God has provided you. Make sure your needs come before your wants. I can't stress that enough. Or what you may end up doing is you may end up losing your needs at the expense of your wants. If all you're spending your resources on is wants, then you're likely not going to have any for your needs. Now, one additional admonition: be sure and leave money in room in your budget for helping others. Now, you say, well, but I'm tithing. One of the things that we do as a church is twice a year, we will have at Maundy Thursday service and at our Christmas Eve service, we take up a special collection for benevolence opportunities. That's dedicated funds that's set aside in our, it's not part of our church budget, and we use those. It's deacon maintained, and those are monies set aside for helping people with medical expenses, counseling expenses, all sorts of different things, and it's designated funds. There's no reason why that you can't do that in your own personal situation, because you never know when you're going to run into somebody who really needs a little bit of help over and above their normal situation. We're reminded in Acts 20:35 that says, "In everything I showed you that by working hard in this manner you must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord. He himself said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.' You will be blessed as you invest in others with the resources God gave you." Okay, so as I said, on Schedule 2, this is simply a tool to list every single thing that you are spending your money on. Now then, the question may be in your mind, okay, how frequently do you do this? Well, the first suggestion that I have is, how frequently do you get paid? If you get paid once a week, then do your budget or your spending once a week. If you get paid twice a week, every other Friday, whatever it is, that will be the schedule that you're going to be maintaining, and that I would suggest that you do your budget on that basis. Simply because there's an old accounting principle that says matching. You match the resources with the expenditures. If you receive money in your paycheck once a week, that's how frequently you should be doing your budgeting and your spending tracking. Now, also realize that this schedule, along with all the rest of them, this is not a one-time do it and then you're done with it. Because everybody knows that your spending needs, your spending opportunities, your spending wants are going to change. They're going to change. Now, that having been said, your rent and your mortgage doesn't change, your car payment doesn't change, but there are things that do change. Your electric bill changes, your gas usage changes, your food budget will change. So just realize that some things are static and some things are dynamic in putting this together. And I would even suggest that if you really get into it and you really want to, put your budget together and then go back and track your actual expenditures up next to that. Put your budget together and then, okay, did we spend what we budgeted for? Now, once you get all of these things line itemed out and you say, okay, all of my expenditures, all of my needs, whatever I'm budgeting for, the spreadsheet totals it up, and then you say, okay, my total needs, my total outflow, if you will, you then compare that back on Schedule 1 to the number that you came up with, your 80% number. Hopefully, the 80% number is at least equal to or greater than the number you came up with on Schedule 2. If the number in the total that you came up with on Schedule 2 is greater than 80% of your resources, again, what's the opportunities? Unless you can increase your receipts in your total household income, which rises, then the only other thing you can do is go back and look at this and start paring things down. What don't we need to spend? What can we do without? The goal is to get your expenditures equal to or less than the 80% number that you have coming in on your total household receipts, your working budget. Okay. Now then, so once you've got all of this done, once you've got all of this taken care of and you've got your periodic budget, and if you want to, you can even do this annually too. I would suggest, to kind of give an idea, if you get really ambitious and do it based on your paycheck frequency, but then do an annual budget. So, but at least do it on the paycheck frequency. Okay, so now you've got your emergency fund being built up. You've got your receipts quantified. You've got your expenditures scheduled out and listed. Now then, we're going to go back to that final savings account, and then we're going to start doing one thing. Notice what is not on Schedule 2. There's one spending caption on there, or that's not on there. What's not on there is credit card payments. And why is that? Why did I purposely leave off credit card payments on this periodic schedule? Because you're not supposed to have credit card payments. But you're saying, but I do. Okay, so we're going to give you an idea and a methodology to get out from under that nemesis that is credit card payments. So if you'll turn over to Schedule 4, which is on page 13. I didn't plan it that way, but it's lucky 13 on paying off debt. So, there is a method for getting your credit card debt under control. It may be tedious, it may be an eye-opening experience, but it is necessary. And here's the way you do it. You take all of your credit card statements and you lay them out on the table and you put them in order of lowest balance outstanding to highest balance outstanding. For the sake of argument, oops, Tammy's not in here too. There we go. For the sake of argument, I have given examples of 4. Yours could be 3, yours could be 10, it doesn't matter. The principle is exactly the same. So what you do is you schedule out on Schedule 4, let's say you have a JCPenney's, I don't know, is JCPenney's even around, come to think of it? Sears I know is defunct. Visa, MasterCard, whatever it is, whatever the balance on your credit card is that's the lowest, you list it. You list the name of the vendor, you list how much your minimum payment is, and the then in place outstanding balance. Then you go to the next highest one and list all that information. Then you go to the next highest until you get all of them listed. And you total up those 2 columns that say total minimum payments and total balance owed.
Larry, can we put loans in there too?
Not yet. Not yet. You can if you don't have any credit card debts.
Okay.
But we'll get to loans in just a second. So, now that you've got all those listed, hopefully you haven't fainted yet. And so what we're going to tell you to do is, first, without fail, no exceptions to the rule, always, always, always make the minimum payment on, at least the minimum payment, every single month on or before the due date. Let me say that again. Always, always, always make at least the minimum payment on every single one on or before the due date. I don't know if you've ever looked at your credit card statement, but now by federal law, they have to give you a couple of 3 pieces of information. One, the total amount that you're going to have paid if you only make the minimum payment and how long that's going to take you, and that'll be a shock to you. And if you miss a payment by even 1 day, they have the right to jack up. You're thinking, well, my credit card interest rate is, I don't know, 7% or 10% or whatever the number is. If you miss by 1 day, they have the right to jack that interest rate up to something that's more like 20 to 30%. Figure out what that's going to do to your payoff time frame. If for every dollar that you pay, 25 to 30 cents of it is going to them with no reduction of your principal balance outstanding. So, That's the first rule. Always, always, always make your minimum payments on time. Then what you're going to do is you're going to say, all right, the lowest balance I'm going to take, and I'm going to at least double that and hopefully triple pay that one until you get it paid off. Now, so what we've got here is we've got a JCPenney's card with $18.50 minimum monthly payment. We're going to double and triple that to round that up to say it's $50 that you're paying on that. You're still making the rest of the minimum monthly payments, but you're going to double and triple up on that first one, the lowest balance, until it is paid off. So now you're already spending $50, so you're going to take that $50 and add that to your next highest balance minimum payment. So instead of paying $35.50 to Sears, they may not still be around either, I don't know. We're now going to be paying $85 or $90 a month, and we're going to continue to make that the rest of the minimum payments and $90 on your Sears card until that one's paid off. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that $90 and we're going to add that to the next highest minimum balance, and we're going to start paying that off until we get that. And you keep doing that until you're applying every single payment that you've already been paying each month on that last credit card till you get it paid off. Now then, the question over here was, what do I do with my loans? You basically can apply this same principle to it. Yes, sir?
I have a question. If maybe something happened, you died before, you died as an accident, so does the credit card will affect your family?
I'm sorry, one more time, please.
If you die by accident.
Yes.
So this credit card will affect your family?
Yes. 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 Unfortunately, if I'm understanding your question, credit card debts don't go away when you pass away.
Okay.
They simply go to your estate.
To your family?
Yes. Yes.
So mean that your family have to know all your credit you have?
Yes. Now that brings up an excellent point, because as I said this morning, be sure as you're doing this, this is not a solitary exercise. Whether it be it's scheduling your receipts, whether it's scheduling your expenditures, scheduling your credit card payoffs, any of this stuff, this is a family affair. Get your spouse involved. If they're old enough, get your children involved, because this affects them too. As Ward said this morning, your kids may want a, $150 pair of Nike tennis shoes. If you get to there where they know what your expenditures are and the limits of your household budget are, they can better understand why that instead of the $150 or $200 pair of Nike tennis shoes, you can only afford, and the budget is only for $50 or $75 or whatever the number is. That's a household determined thing. None of this should be done in isolation. This is getting your family involved, including your spouse, and if they're old enough, your children. Now, obviously, you make that determination when they're old enough to get involved in this. But use this as a teachable moment for your children. Bring them along in this process. Good question. Thank you. Okay, so now you've got all your credit card paid off, and the question then becomes, okay, can we do essentially the same thing on home loans, car loans, this kind of thing? Yes, you can. Now, you can schedule those out because you already know what your monthly payment is because of Schedule 2, what your monthly mortgage payment is. You know because of Schedule 2 what your car payments are. You know, for instance, if you have student loans or any other personal loans that require a fixed minimum amount of payments. Again, you list them out in order of lowest balance to highest balance, but it's a little more tricky on these things because some mortgages, some personal loans, some car loans have, not so many now, but they may very well have a prepayment penalty. So you need to be very careful of that. If there is a prepayment penalty, meaning you can't apply additional principal to your payment, you need to know that. But if that's, and that's fairly rare nowadays, but if you don't, then I would simply say, okay, what is the highest interest rate loan that you have, and start applying additional double up and triple up payments on that one. But only after you have paid off your credit card balances. And then once you've got your credit card balances paid off, freeze them in a big block of ice in the freezer. So that you won't, because you remember you've already got your emergency fund. When the washing machine breaks, when the car needs repair, you don't want to have that temptation to pull out the credit cards. If it's not budgeted, it's an emergency expenditure. Yes, sir.
Is there any way you can live without the credit card? Because sometimes if you need the rental car, they need a credit card.
That unfortunately is the practical matter of it. There's a number of ways to handle that. Yeah, you probably need something for that kind of thing, but I would really, if for instance, if you know that you're going to have to have a car rental, either you budget it, or it comes out of your emergency fund. That's anything you can do to not have to pull out the credit cards. That's what you want to do. Yeah. Now, I keep talking about this emergency fund, but it's important, but the dollar amount of it is not so critical, but it's based on your household receipts. But you want something that if you lose your job, you're not absolutely in the breadlines, or you're not absolutely just living hand to mouth simply because you don't have an emergency fund. And we suggest 4 to 6 months of net receipts because that will carry you through for at least 4 to 6 months of normal living expenses, and it buys you some time to say, okay, I'm going to re-examine. If you lose your job, you've got some time where you can go in and re-examine your household expenditures and pare them down so that you're not expending every single thing that you used to on a monthly or a weekly or bi-weekly basis. You're not in panic mode at that moment in time, other than once you get over the fact of losing your job. Any questions on that before we move on? Because this is, as Ward said, as Troy said, this is a lot of data that we're throwing at you, and it's a lot to absorb. Yes, sir.
From counseling people, and a lot of people they'll say, well, I pay off the credit card every month, and as though that's the end of the matter and they're okay. But I've also discovered though that you spend more with a credit card. Mm-hmm. If you go out to eat with a credit card, you'll spend probably up to 20% more on a meal than you will if you shell out cash.
Or more frequently.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And also people forget what they put on their credit card.
Mm-hmm.
And they're surprised at the end of the month. Oh, I forgot about those
yes.
2 or 3
yeah.
things.
And kind of along those same lines, people say, well, I use my debit card for meals or whatever. And that's fine if you don't like to carry a lot of cash, but it still is an obligation for you to get that receipt and go back to your Schedule 2 and say, okay, I have spent $25 against my meal allowance or my food allowance or my clothing allowance or whatever it is that you just spent the money on, and make sure that you keep track of it, because none of this gets you out from under the obligation to reconcile your bank statement. Because the thing you don't want to do is you say, well, I budgeted, and then overspend more money than you have coming in because you've overdrafted your bank account.
My wife says she doesn't overspend, I underdeposit.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Second question we have. I have a question.
Okay, so now that you've got your receipts scheduled, you've got your expenditures scheduled, and you've got a big way towards paying off your credit cards and your loans and all this kind of stuff, the final thing that we want to look at is say, okay, where are we? What's our current position? What's our current status? So if you go back to page 12, which is Schedule 3, there's a little schedule there, not so little, called what is your current net worth? Okay, that's a big term that simply means what is my net financial position? Now, the way you do that, thank you, Ward. Yes. You're going to have to start throwing spit wads at me or something. Basically, what you do to complete this schedule is you say, okay, what is my house worth? What is my car worth, or cars? Household furnishing, anything that is an asset, anything that has value, you list it up here. Now, sometimes you'll know exactly what your mortgage or your house is worth because once a year the taxing authority tells you how much that they're going to tax you on it for. Your car, you can get some type of a net worth if you go to Kelley Blue Book or some of those things. You can get an estimate. This is not an exact science. It's to give you an indication of where you stand. So the first thing you do is you list all of your assets. Estimate what your clothes, your total clothes, your furniture, and all these kind of things are worth. Again, it's not an exact science, but you just provide a reasonable estimate of what your resources are. Once you do that, then total it down. That's your total gross assets. Then, on the next section down there is your liabilities. Unless you're extremely fortunate, you probably will have a mortgage. So you need to put whatever your mortgage balance is down there as a liability. If you owe money on your cars, put that down there as a liability. If you have student loans, if you have any type of personal loans, anything. Here, if you have credit card debt, put the total of your credit card debt because that's a liability as a draw against your resources. If unfortunately you pass away, somebody's going to have to settle up your estate. They don't go away. Once you've listed all of your liabilities, how much you owe, total those up and take the difference between those two. Now, if you've never done financial planning, if you've never done a budget before, if you've never done any of this, it's not uncommon for that net number to be negative. But this gives you a position. This gives you a point in time, where am I? And the goal is as you pay off your credit card debts, as you get your budgeting under control, as you pray about your resources and your receipts coming in, that number will turn from negative to positive. And that's the goal, is to have a positive net worth. Now, one of the things that I didn't tell you to put on there, but you are going to, is once you've got your emergency fund, once you've got your credit card debts paid off, and you're on your way to paying off your house and all the things like that, is then remember that bottom 10% down there that we talked about, that savings, paying off the debt thing? Once your credit card debts are paid off, you should have a fairly sizable number for your household that you can then start investing for retirement, for college fund, all of these things that you were not able to do before. Once you start investing, and you'll have, that's assets that you can put up there. Now, again, this is not a one-time shot. This is something that on Schedule 4, you don't have to look at that every week, but I would suggest that you look at it probably once a quarter, because as you pay your credit card debt off, your liabilities are going to go down, which means your net worth is going to go up. Look at this at least once a quarter, because it's very uplifting and it's very heartening to see that day when that number turns from a negative to a positive net worth. That's one of the great measures for knowing I'm making some progress here. I'm making some progress. Okay. That's basically a whole lot of information, a whole lot of probably trying to learn about this through drinking out of a fire hose. But hopefully it will have given you some information and some methodology for making a lot of headroads in progress into that. Now, as I said before, you'll probably have recognized a lot of these things from Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace course, and you may also recognize them from some of the other courses. Regardless of where they come from, they are still based on sound financial biblical principles, and that's the key to this whole thing. So let me leave you with one final passage, Isaiah 41:10, which says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This morning we talked about fear in the morning session. In this passage, Isaiah tells the Israelites, "Do not fear, for God is with you." Isaiah said, "Do not anxiously look about you, for God is with you." In this context, we can surely say that trust in God is peace. As I said, and I can't say this enough, get God involved in every single aspect of this. Pray about it, get your family involved in it, and recognize that you're going to have to look at this monthly, weekly, however frequently you need to be looking at it.